Good evening to all of you, and welcome to our side event, um, accelerating the SDGs monitoring and implementation using SDG 16 plus. I welcome you all on behalf of Asia Development Alliance. Asia Development Alliance is a regional platform in Asia. We are membership-based platform, and the side event is being organized by the National Planning Commission of Nepal with the Asia Development Alliance. And we have many partners who are joining us, and many co-hosts who are going to join this side event. And they are all party parliamentary group of Malaysia, APPMG on Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations Residence Coordination Office of Nepal, Korea NGO Council of Overseas Development, KCOC, NGO Federation of Nepal, SDGs Forum of Nepal, Japan NGO Center of International Cooperation, JANIC, Transparency, Accountability and Participation TAP Network, Forus, Malaysian CSO-SDGs Alliance, and our partners are OHCHR and KOICA. So thank you so much, all of you, for your support. And it's said that we want to accelerate SDGs, we need to accelerate SDG 16. So the side event is addressing various challenges of SDG 16 and the various implementation mechanism, how it's being implemented. As we have seen a lot of data challenges in many countries in our experiences in past few years, and some of them are where the governments are clearly saying that there are data gaps, and especially there's a lack of disaggregated data. So we are also talking about some CSO-led data, which is called citizens-led data. And there are various other things, and we are also talking about how can we make how can we accelerate SDGs progress actually through multi-stakeholder participation. um, Without just wasting much time, I would just I would just welcome you all. And we have our Sarah is a resident coordinator of UNDP Nepal. And Sarah, we welcome you here for our side event, and the floor is yours.
But thank you for having me participate. I am Sarah Beslo Nyanti. I'm the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Nepal. And I'll be giving just brief remarks on behalf of the UN system in Nepal. Firstly, thanking you all for organizing this and for inviting us to participate. And we look forward to a healthy and great deliberation. I would like to note and observe all protocol for all of those present. For all of the members of the National Planning Commission, I'm not sure of who all are on, but Honorable Vice Chair Dr. Pushparaj Kadel of the NPC, and all honorable members of the NPC, government representatives of UN organizations, representatives of civil society, and ladies and gentlemen. So I thank the National Planning Commission and the NGO Federation for this invitation for me to be part of this event. It provides me an opportunity to make some opening remarks and just sort of touching on some points in relation to SDG 16 in Nepal. SDG 16 plays a foundational role in making the 2030 agenda truly a sustainable development and transformative people-centered agenda. SDG 16 is very important to make sure that across everything we do, the heart of what matters, the people and the rights of the people and how they're actualized is crafted. While some of the topics that we find under SDG 16 were already present in the MDGs, what the SDGs allowed is a more integrated approach and understanding, recognizing that the global reality that our societies face is that we don't live in silos. We don't operate in silos. And so definitely how we respond to the issues that societies face cannot be done in silos. And I think that's what the SDGs has done for us, allowed us to have the framework to move outside of silos and work across on issues that are cross-cutting and interconnected. As it relates to gender, for example, there's no way you can work on gender equality if you don't work on gender-based violence. And how do we reduce inequalities without promoting inclusive and participatory decision-making? Peaceful, inclusive societies, access to justice, effective, accountable institutions, the 3 pillars of SDG16. That's the glue that holds all the SDGs together. As the resident coordinator of the United Nations system, the highest ranking official of the UN in the country, for me, it's a privilege to lead the UN system in a country which has adopted such an ambitious 2030 agenda. And that's reflected in the Voluntary National Review Report of 2020. We know that the VNR emphasis on good governance and accountability are a priority for the government of Nepal. And in all countries with an ongoing process, we believe that this plays a crucial and important part, governance and accountability. Nepal has a constitution that holds true to the country's commitment and ambition for a peaceful, inclusive, and just society. In its very preamble, it enshrines a commitment to ending all forms of discrimination and oppression and lays the foundations for protecting and promoting social and cultural solidarity, tolerance, and harmony and unity in diversity. I want to highlight the significant progress Nepal has made with the 17 laws that it has enacted to protect the fundamental rights enshrined in its constitution. It is now time for development of the regulations for the implementation of these laws. And as the United Nations system in Nepal, we look forward to supporting the government in how we move that forward. Nepal has made progress in the last years over transitional justice. However, there has been a bit more that's yet to be done. A bit more has been undone. And for us to be able to bring the history and effects of the conflict to a conclusive end, there's a need for us to ensure the completion of the implementation of the victim-centric pathway for reparations. Steps are being taken by the government now to amend the TRC Act and to extend the life of the commissions of the TRC. But what we will hope for is that we can continue to support the government as we move this forward to ensure that the victims have a voice and that we can help to bring that to bear. And in recent meetings with the government, there's been such an openness to that. The government has been open to this discussion, and we just want to remind the government that we're here to support and to make sure that Nepal becomes a global success story on transitional justice. I think Nepal has the recipe to do that if we can conclude the TRC process and bring the remaining pieces to a comprehensive and conclusive end. And we look forward to being part of that story with the government of Nepal, with the people of Nepal, and helping to tell that story as well. I'm pleased to know and to highlight to all those who are present here today, the government has accepted about 83% of the Universal Periodic Review recommendations in the recent process. And they include transitional justice, gender-based violence, caste and ethnicity discrimination, advancing the rule of law, so many. And what we, as the United Nations, are saying is that now the government needs a strong plan of action to implement all of those recommendations. And it's important that we support the government to do that and also support the subnational governments as well for them to have their own action plans at the provincial level and lower levels. The UN stands ready to support the government throughout all of these processes. But one of the things that's really necessary is for us to strengthen data collection, data analysis, because the government and people may be making gains on some of the targets and making progress. We may not necessarily be reporting it appropriately because we don't have the right data being collected, the right analysis of the data. And Nepal was one of the 47 countries last year through that submitted a VNR to the high-level political forum in 2020 is submitted. And it identified 3 areas of support: capacity development for local government, collection and analysis, but also disaggregation and dissemination of data. And I think the fact that Nepal could identify that as an area of need or as areas of need, that for us as a UN means that it's incumbent upon us to help the government with data collection, with data analysis, disaggregation, and dissemination to ensure that gains made in Nepal are properly reported and reflected. We also want to recognize the fact that the Nepal government has developed the second National Action Plan to address women, peace and security, the NAP2. It's still pending in cabinet, but we'd like to encourage the movement of that approval and the implementation of that plan. It's such a holistic plan. It's very rich, and it's all encompassing. It includes issues that related to conflict, sexual violence, disappeared families. It's really holistic and has a wide range of issues, and we look forward to helping the government to implement that. The work that's been done, it's a lot. The work that's yet to be done is also still much. But that's why I think we're all here as partners together having this conversation to let the government of Nepal know that they're not alone in this quest, and that we as the United Nations, we stand ready to support the government as it navigates its way through implementing all of the wonderful plans that have been made, and also navigating through some of the challenges with implementing those plans, and making sure that we all are part of the Nepal success story. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your very inspirational talk. And it's nice to see how the government is working with UN institutions and with the civil society, especially on data. And also to know, it's nice to hear the recommendation, 80% of the recommendations has been accepted. That's a great thing. So we expect that it happens. It's a very good replicable study. I mean, I think that other countries could also look at it and look at the human rights aspects that we want to incorporate into the SDG 16. I think this is a very well example. Thank you so much again for your great speech. And now I have the privilege to welcome Professor Dr. Pushparaj Kandal, who is Honorable Vice Chairman, Vice Chair of National Planning Commission. Dr. Pushparaj, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, civil society leaders, media persons. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver my words as a keynote speaker and share the progress and efforts that Nepal government has made to achieve sustainable development goals in this high-level political forum today. Sustainable development goal is at the center of Nepal's development vision and priorities. It underpins our national aspiration of prosperous Nepal, happy Nepali. 2030 agenda is much more than the sum of its 17 goals. It symbolizes an ambitious and transformative agenda, a hope for sustainable and prosperous future of planet and peoples. And building on the experience of last 5 years, we must strive hard to deliver the promise we made in 2015. We have mainstreamed the SDGs into the national plans and programs. They are now being implemented at all levels. We have made some significant achievements in key areas, including poverty reduction, food security, education, gender equality, basic sanitation, and energy access. Our people have been enjoying fundamental rights and freedoms as enshrined in our constitution. At this moment, I am also pleased to let you know that Nepal has just published the SDG 16 plus progress report, highlighting Nepal's roadmap for peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, achievements made, and key areas of improvement with transformative strategies. We all know that the SDG Goal 16 is the major enabler for fostering peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. Altogether, 36 SDG targets directly measure the aspect of peace, inclusion, or access to justice, with only a third of these found in SDG 16. Therefore, we call it SDG 16 plus targets. The SDG 16 plus targets are strongly linked to all sustainable development goals and key to achieving the transformative 2030 agenda. The Constitution of Nepal also pledges to create an egalitarian society based on the principles of proportional inclusion, representation, and participation to ensure equitable economy, prosperity, and social justice. To realize this constitutional spirit, our ongoing 15th plan is focused on poverty eradication and reducing inequality by creating a just society based on economic and social equality. To accelerate it, we have constitutional commissions to oversee the issues related to women, Dalits, Tharu, Muslims, and other minority communities who are structurally excluded from the social and economic mainstream. To address these challenges, we are in the process of preparing the Leave No One Behind national framework. In Nepal, constitutional bodies have been working to control corruption and to ensure the rule of law and fairness in public affairs and dealings. Moreover, various acts have also been promulgated for institutionalizing greater accountability and transparency in the government. The modified criminal and civil codes 2018 that is under implementation with a motto prompt justice, justice for all is one of the examples. In addition, Nepal has also made an institutional arrangement of the government for SDG implementation. For example, National SDG Steering Committee, which is chaired by the Right Honorable Prime Minister, SDG Implementation and Monitoring Committee, which is chaired by the Honorable Vice Chair of the NPC, and thematic committees, which are chaired by the respective Honorable Member of NPC. Further, a provincial level mechanism for SDG implementation has also been formulated. I'm happy to share that we are progressing very well to reduce inequalities. Nepal has set constitutional provisions related to gender equalities, reducing inequalities, and promoting peace, justice, inclusion, and accountable institutions. It further highlights the different acts of Nepal formulated to implement these constitutional provisions. The Constitution of Nepal guarantees 33% seats in the federal and provincial parliaments and 40% in the local levels. Consequently, the proportion of seats held by women in national parliament, provincial parliaments, and local levels has raised to 33.5%, 34.4%, and 40.8% respectively. Women's participation in the civil service has raised to 26.17%. The government has recently formulated national gender equality policy to promote gender equality. Good progress has been seen in the Gender Empowerment Measurement Index, reduction in physical and sexual violence against women, and average hours spent by women in the household work. Positive sign has been observed on the Economic and Political Empowerment Index, and significant improvement has been seen in the primary school enrollment and completion as well. Improvement has also been observed in psychological aggression or physical punishment against children, lesser incidences of sexual violence, reduction on the corruption index, increase in primary government expenditures as a proportion of the original approved budget, and proportion of population satisfied with their last experience of public services. During the first 5 years of the SDG implementation, the share of the bottom 40% population in total consumption has been increased. Similarly, the income shares of the bottom 40% population have been also improved. Nepal's position in the Doing Business Index has been improved. It has been ranked 94th with an improvement from the 105th ranked last year. Reducing inequalities and provincial imbalances is one of the top priorities of the government of Nepal. To achieve it, the government is putting its efforts towards addressing the issues of deep structural inequalities, for example, land ownership and landlessness, enhancing human capital and capabilities, increasing investment in production industries, and increasing access to inclusive and quality health and education skill development, strengthening social security and protection for target groups through progressive taxation. Nepal has also started province-wise analysis of overall socio-economic development through Nepal Human Development Report published this year, which reflects the status and progress in this regard. Despite the good progress made so far in achieving the SDG 16 plus targets, there are some challenges seen to achieve the SDG 16 plus target. These challenges specifically are on mainstreaming the 16 plus agenda at subnational levels, resource mobilization, data management, coordination, and monitoring and evaluation. Additionally, COVID-19 has a significant impact in achieving the 16 plus targets. Hence, meaningful evolution amid the COVID-19 pandemic situation has been also seen as a big challenge in accelerating the efforts to achieve the SDG16+ agenda, which require more political commitment and financing to implement it. Likewise, an effective link has to be established between justice, peace, and inclusion policies and programs. Despite the challenges, Nepal is very committed to achieving SDG16+ targets and exploring ways to minimize the worst impacts created by COVID-19 by implementing recovery strategies. I would like to emphasize that without peace, justice, and inclusion, none of the SDGs can be delivered in full. To that end, we need strong institutions and good governance to make it impossible for societies to reach their full development potential. On the other hand, social, economic, and environmental progress play an important role in creating the condition for peaceful, just, and inclusive society. Inclusive economic growth and social development reduce the risk of violence and conflict and help society to work together for a better future. Before concluding, I would like to thank all the bilateral and multilateral development partners, including the UN systems, private sectors, cooperative sectors, civil societies, and media persons for your significant contribution made so far towards achieving the sustainable development goals. As the COVID-19 pandemic has devastated livelihoods, disrupted economies, and distressed the public health and social security systems, achieving 2030 commitment has become more challenging. In this context, we appeal to the international community to redouble the efforts to produce the vaccines and ensure the equitable availability as a global public good to the needy countries like Nepal. Let me also take this opportunity to express our gratitude to our neighbors, friendly countries, including the development partners who have been providing generous support with the emergency life-saving equipment and medical supplies that were critical in controlling the dire situation in Nepal. Before concluding, I would like to invite all our bilateral and multilateral development partners to support us in controlling the pandemic as well as accelerating the implementation of SDGs in Nepal, and look forward for your continued support. Last but not the least, peace, progress, and sustainability are built on the foundations of justice. So let us jointly put our efforts to build those foundations of justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kandel, for a very, very impressive speech. This is indeed a challenging time for all of us, and we are all. But it's nice to see the reiterating the Nepal government your commitment to SDG 16+, and how can we make our how can we work together, especially in the vaccination, because we are also working on equitable vaccine, and that can be reached to all the needy countries. So thank you so much again. And now may I invite Mr. Jitram Lamaji, who is the President of NGO Federation of Nepal. Jitram Lamaji, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator Jasna. Honorable Professor Dr. Pushparaj Kadel, Vice Chairman of National Planning Commission, Government of Nepal. Honorable Member Min Sai, distinguished panelists, speakers, Parliament members, government officials, representative of United Nations, CSOs, media, and especially all participants of this important side event on accelerating the SDGs monitoring and implementation, acting using SDG 16. First of all, I would like to welcome and thank all of you on behalf of NGO Federation of Nepal and Nepal SDG Forum as one of co-hosts of this side event. This has been a special opportunity for us to come together with Government of Nepal as the host of this event. I am thankful to National Planning Commission of Nepal for this initiative, especially Mr. Min Sai, Joint Secretary Kiran Rupakheti, and Director Naren Bhatta, and all officials of Nepal government, UN agencies, and civil society organizations and networks around the world for this event clearly indicates the SDG 16+ is highly significant for the achievement of SDG. We have a member of Parliament and Human Rights Commissions of Malaysia in this event, and representative of OHCHR, UNDP Oslo, UNRCO Nepal. I take this opportunity to express my thanks to Sarah just express her views. District coordinator of Nepal, and also she is head of United Nations system in Nepal. She has always been keen to work with civil society organizations in Nepal. It is also my pleasure to state that global networks of civil society organizations have been closely working together to advance the agenda of SDG16+, which are the enabler for acceleration and achievement of SDGs. APSD, TAP Network, Forus, KCOC, among others, all around the globe, and will continue this very important role to engaging CSO or localization. Yeah. Okay, it's okay now?
Yeah.
Are you hearing me? Okay. National Planning Commission and Government of Nepal is playing very important role to engaging CSOs for localizing SDGs in Nepal, which is a key roadmap for achieving SDG 2030 agenda. I especially thanks Mr. Vice Chair Pushpa Kadel, now on a host of this event, and all high-level officials of National Planning Commission. I would also like to take this opportunity to emphasize that the goals like SDG 16, SDG 5, SDG 10 have been the primary concern of the civil society. CSOs can work with and support the government to implement many initiatives. More importantly, I strongly believe that no one should undermine the civil society participation and monitoring role thereupon. I hope this side event will be a milestone in building the better understanding how SDG16 Plus have higher importance in monitoring and implementation of SDGs, and how they can result acceleration of the SDGs. I wish for the interactive and fruitful session. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Jitramji, for emphasizing the role of civil society as equal partner in SDGs implementation. Thank you again. And now I invite Anselmo Lee to initiate the panel 1, which is integrating SDG 16 plus with human rights at global level. Anselmo, the floor is yours and you are there to moderate. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is 9 o'clock here in Seoul and also Japan. And I think the early morning in New York. So this is a really global panel. So we have about 40 minutes for panel 1. And as introduced by Josna, the topic is integrate SDG 16 plus. Plus means for me, including SDG 17 and many others. And with the human rights, also democratic governance. As we see in the program, we have 4 speakers, all global level, 2 from the civil society, 2 from UN, 1 on human rights, the other one UNDP governance. So now you can see the 4 main components of this panel. So I'd like to invite one by one with a specific question. Is it John Romano in the room now? Deidra, Catherine, and Arvin? Okay, are you ready to engage? Okay, very good. Okay, as I said, you know, the SDG 16 plus, in the introductory remark, Sarah said, you know, 16 is a foundational role, you know, the basis for achieving this transformer agenda. So my first question goes to John Romano, and he's a global coordinator of a TEM network. As you know, TEM network has been leading the CSO campaign on SDG 16. They produce a lot of good material for advocacy and training and so on. So John, could you please share your experience in terms of what is the role of civil society, especially engaging in 16, you know, as a way to achieve the SDG as a whole? John, you have about 3 minutes to share your experience and perspective.
Okay.
Good morning, New York. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Anselmo, and thanks for everyone for joining this this side event. I know that the HLPF is very very busy for everyone. So I think, Anselmo, to answer your question, I mean, in a very short answer, I think civil society has a very big role to play when it comes to advancing SDG 16+. I mean, we've seen in recent years, especially how civil society and people have looked to hold governments accountable. There have been cases of shrinking civic space in many countries around the world, with civil society mobilizing through mass protest movements, for example, to hold governments accountable for more people-centered policies. So that's the short answer there. The civil society is critically important. One thing that we as the TAP network do and will do going forward is to help strengthen the capacity of civil society to engage with and advance SDG 16+ in their own countries and contexts. One of the things that we'll use to do that is a resource that we just launched yesterday called the SDG16+ Civil Society Toolkit. It's very easy to find. It's just www.sdg16toolkit.org. And I'll also put it in the chat box after this as well. But this is a really comprehensive resource guide that includes detailed guidance on things like spotlight reporting, how to engage with parliamentarians around SDG 16+, how to work with and produce data, a wide range of topics relevant for civil society, and also includes concrete case studies for colleagues to also learn from others' experience as well. It also includes a really detailed SDG 16 targets and interlinkages guide. So takes a look at each of the targets, what are the issues that it includes, what are the other SDG 16 targets that these targets are interlinked with, and also other international, and other human rights agreements that these targets are linked with as well. The content will be available on a web platform, as I mentioned, sdg16.org. So we will constantly keep that content updated. So for all of you here, anyone can send us content to showcase on this web platform as well, including case studies, reports, things like that. So we really want this to be a comprehensive resource that we'll keep updated going forward. And then just finally going forward, we'll look to build on this resource, develop training modules, e-learning courses, things like that, and then also look to bring this to the national level with our partners and members to really again ensure that civil society is mobilizing and their capacity is strengthened to advance SDG 16+ in their own context. So I'll stop there. I'll provide the link in the chat box for everyone. You can explore the toolkit on your own time, but and there's a lot more to unpack there. So hopefully you find it to be useful. But thanks, Anselmo.
Oh, thank you very much, John, and also congratulations on your excellent new publication. I remember you published 2016 also advocacy toolkit we used together in Asia. Do you remember? We organized a workshop in Asia, and also with your funding support, I went to Nepal to conduct first national workshop on SDG 16. So when I was listening to the speech from the honorary Dr. Pusa from Nepal, I was extremely happy because Nepal is really leading as a government, not civil society, this SDG 16. So I think this is the result of all our common effort for last 4 or 5 years. Okay, so thank you for your contribution. And also later, I want to ask you about SDG 16 and this HLPF. SDG 16 is one of the priority issues. That will be the second question, but not now. So please prepare for that intervention. So let's go to the second speaker, Diadra Burka from Forus International. So many of us are members of the Forus as a national platform. And also Forus has been playing the leadership role, not only the 16, but also 17 with a focus on capacity building. So I'd like to invite Diadra to share your experience perspective. You are in Europe, right? So now we move from New York to where are you now? The Paris or Dublin?
No, I'm actually based in Dublin, Anselmo.
Dublin now, yeah. Okay, so let's move to Europe. Okay, you have 30 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Anselmo, and hello to you and to everybody else on this important side event today to discuss SDG 16+. So Forus is very happy to be here today because we're a global civil society network, as you said, and our members include 68 national development platforms from different countries around the world and also 7 regional coalitions. And our global advocacy work, as you mentioned, in which our members engage, focuses mainly on SDG 16 and SDG 17. We believe that SDG 16 is one of the most important goals in the SDG agenda. Obviously, we don't like to single out individual goals, but this is the peaceful, just and inclusive societies pillar of the 2030 agenda. And really its focus and the focus of SDG 16+, which I'll say a little bit about in a minute, is on enhancing government accountability, on building trust and sustaining peace. And we believe that these conditions are essential if the 2030 agenda is to be successfully implemented. And the concept of SDG 16+, and I must recognize the great work that the TAP network has done in this area, it's really about recognizing important and wide-ranging interlinkages between SDG 16 and many other SDGs. And so for this reason, the implementation of SDG 16+, if we do it well, has the potential to catalyze the implementation of the 2030 agenda as an integrated and mutually reinforcing whole. So Forus particularly recognizes the interdependency between SDG 16 and SDG 17. So as you know, SDG 17 concerns the means of implementation for the whole agenda, and that includes capacity building, financing for development, and multi-stakeholder partnerships. So we would like to see SDG 16 and 17 being implemented in a way that recognizes that important interdependency, particularly between these two goals. And this is obviously where the concept of SDG 16+ is very important. We also believe that the focus of SDG 16+ on human rights in the SDGs is strongest in this goal, SDG 16. So SDG 16 lifts the human rights agenda up and makes it clear that sustainable development can't be achieved without ensuring civil and political rights. And so there is an opportunity here to use the data and information that have been produced for other relevant reporting processes, including for human rights mechanisms such as the Universal Periodic Review process, to report on SDG 16+ and on issues related to peace, justice, and inclusion. And so the fact that SDG 16+ focuses on links to other SDGs means that the human rights dimensions of all these other goals can also be highlighted and strengthened. And the last thing I'd like to say is just about civic space. As you know, most of the Forus members are very focused on advocating around civic space. There's a lot of concern that civic space should remain open and the opportunities for civic participation should be strong in countries across the world. And SDG 16 relates most directly to this issue of civic space, because SDG 16 targets include the development of inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making at all levels, and also the protection of fundamental freedoms in accordance with international human rights standards and national human rights laws. So the kind of freedoms that SDG 16 promotes include fundamental rights to associate, to assemble peacefully, and to express views and opinions. And these civil and political rights are protected in international agreements and in national legislation in many countries. And they're what we refer to as civic space and an enabling environment for civil society. So we believe that SDG 16+ has a hugely important role to play in protecting and promoting civic space. And we'd like to congratulate the government of Nepal for the kind of regional leadership it has shown on SDG 16. And we look forward to working with civil society organizations, particularly in Asia, to make sure that SDG 16 is really prioritized as an accelerator for all of the other SDGs to be implemented. Thanks, Anselmo.
So now we have, we have two approaches, SDG 16+ approach now by Forus, SDG 16 by 17 approach, which is go deeper now, I think this can be really a basis for really inclusive and also integral approach to 2030 agenda. Okay, let's go to the third speaker. So now we go to UN. We have two. One is human rights. The other one is governance. Now, Catherine Liao, are you based in New York or Geneva? Catherine?
New York.
You're also New York. Okay. So, you know, the human rights-based approach has been recognized by the UN as a main approach to the SDG. So would you like to, could you please share, you know, how the, as a UN agency on human rights, look at SDG, particularly 16, how we can create more synergy between the SDG 16 and human rights approach? You have 3 minutes, please, Catherine.
I thank you, as well as the government of Nepal and APA for organizing this side event. As you know, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights works at the global level and through its regional and national level offices towards several targets of SDG 16, the reduction of violence, the rule of law, illicit finance and arms flow, corruption, inclusive decision-making, fundamental freedoms, institutions, and non-discriminatory laws. But I'd like to start with the first point of understanding that we can find many articulations of the relationship between sustainable development and the advancements of right through the SDG framework. So the goals and targets of SDG 16 plus have very strong linkages with many international agreements, including international human rights and labor standards. Efforts to apply human rights to economic ideas and institutions extend back to the birth of the contemporary human rights framework, the Universal Declaration of Rights, of Human Rights, enumerated, for example, fair work, social security, and adequate standards of living, and called upon all states and the organs of the international community to respect them. But let me turn to a human rights issue that we've been thinking and acting upon for the last 18 months. The right to health has touched everyone, everywhere. In fact, the right to life and the well-being of every single human being on the planet is connected to the outcome of this pandemic. Therefore, it's easy to understand the criticality of universal health care, for example, within nations and across nations. We can also see that the right to health is interlinked to the question of access to justice and democratic and inclusive institutions when we examine whether certain groups are necessarily the first beneficiaries of healthcare services. And if we ask ourselves who are the last, or whether there are people who are never to be beneficiaries to the right to health and healthcare at all. We can see that the SDG 16 link clearly here if we ask ourselves who are the ones empowered to participate in policy decisions concerning the provision of healthcare services and who may gain access to redress by institutions that represent them in case there are unjust impacts. If we ask ourselves whether defenders of the right to health feel free to express their ideas and perhaps contest policy decisions that may adversely affect their health, I think that these questions point to the relevance of SDG 16 plus and its complementary and necessary role in the attainment of human rights to health, the human right to health articulated under human rights law. If SDG 16 is as much about peace as it is about justice, SDG 16 must be evaluated in light of its effectiveness in relation to the actual and broader global progress of sustainable development and the attainment of the right to development. This is because, simply put, the perpetuation of endemic poverty is intertwined with social injustice and so often becomes the fuel for the disruption of peaceful societies. So we must frankly ask ourselves whether we can really attain sustainable development if we simply pay lip service to human rights and the entitlements which deplore the poverty of billions of us, poverty made more unconscionable by the extreme wealth of the few. Yesterday, at the opening session of the official high-level political forum discussions, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, stated that fighting corruption, reallocating resources, and rethinking taxation can help to maximize resources for advancing a human rights economy, one that is transformative and delivers access to healthcare. We cannot ignore the reasons that stand in the way of sufficient investment in social spending necessary for the fulfillment of the minimum core obligations and the progressive realization of economic, social, cultural rights. Let me finally add that the evaluation of SDG 16's effectivity and all of the SDGs must not proceed from a misunderstanding that human rights will somehow emerge as the byproduct of development. Because without human rights and social justice at the core, development will come later for some or may never come for others. Human rights are fundamental to the well-being of all people, not only of some, as they call for development to be rooted in equality and social justice. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathleen, especially highlighting the importance of right to health in the context of COVID-19, which we are all affected with. Okay, let's move to the next one. Now the UNDP, the governance issues, human rights governance. Sometimes the SDG16, another name is governance, the democratic governance or good governance. This is also again the foundation for transformative agenda of SDGs. Now from New York, we go to Europe again. I guess, Arvin, are you in Oslo now? I guess so. You're from Oslo Center, right? Okay, let's go to Europe this afternoon, right? So you have also 3 minutes. How you see the SDG16 plus from governance point of view? And governance means basically the civil society engagement. So could you please share the insight and then the perspective on this question? You have 3 minutes, please.
Nepal and Malaysia Development Alliance for inviting for this discussion. I think the previous speakers have raised a number of really important points. I hope we have some time to pick up on them a little later. I just thought perhaps, Anselmo, what would be useful now is that I report a little bit on what we've done together with a network of think tanks called Southern Voice, which is 50 think tanks across Latin America, Asia, and Africa, who together with them, we've asked these questions: to what extent has there been a change in trends affecting the SDG 16 over the last couple of years? And we've done this through roundtables and research, and tried to find out, is there any trends that impact? So let me just run through some of these findings, 3 of them, in fact, the key findings, and they resonate very well with what has already been highlighted. And again, these are findings that come out of these roundtable discussions, so not necessarily a UN opinion in any way, it's just simply research findings. So the first one, is key to what everyone's talked about already, which is the shrinking civic space. We see this as a trend throughout the entire planet. And this is, of course, a worrying trend for many reasons, not least because we know that the quality of governance is dependent on the open civic space. The ability to assert one's rights are also dependent on the open civic space. So, what the roundtables showed us was that many of these legislative procedures or whatever, executive powers that have been used in dealing with the pandemic has also been used to undermine dissent, target human rights defenders and the media, and erode oversight institutions, including the judiciary, legislative, and national human rights institutions. And so there's a very clear message coming out of these roundtables, and that is that you need particular attention to be paid to this brand of politics that has silenced opposition voices and attacked minority rights. So that's the first trend that we can trace through all different regions of the world. The second one, which is also not unfamiliar to this conversation already, is triggers of conflict. I mean, we find that inequality and corruption seems to be even more relevant in triggering conflict around the world. Large and small scale conflicts within communities and on higher level political conflicts. And this, of course, is also worrying because social unrest, again, leads to the weakening of governance systems. And again, the ability to deliver on people's rights is not there in situations of conflict. So what we see then, the increase in inequality, the increase in some types of corruption is actually more than before triggering conflict. Then the third trend, which we see in all regions of the world, is not surprisingly the prevalence of digitalization and how that impacts on governance issues and on services. And we all know, of course, that digital spaces have become an alternative and important tool for political participation. But and it can be used to improve transparency and access to information and services and to promote debate. But it can also at the same time be used to promote misinformation, disinformation, and attack and target opposition, activists, civil society. And we've seen, unfortunately, a very strong trend towards attacking women and disempowering already disenfranchised and marginalized groups. And all of this speaks to an even more challenging governance context for almost every country, because we have lost a lot of terrain during the last couple of years, a year and a half, on these issues. And what we see through this research and roundtables is that, generally speaking, the social contract between citizens and governments is in play. And they even in play in places where there were already being erosion of that contract. And that is a worrying sign. I often say that, please remember that if the Martian was to land on the planet tomorrow and survey the way that humans have decided to organize themselves and exert power over each other, they would conclude, these Martians, that the idea of a commonly owned state that is there to protect everyone's rights, with a commonly financed system to support everyone's rights, that is a historic anomaly in humankind's history. We don't. That's not the way that societies gravitate necessarily towards more democracy, more human rights. So this is a stark reminder that in dealing with an extreme emergency like a pandemic, we are in danger of losing sight of these key, as Derek was saying as well, these key accelerators of the other SDG targets, which is, of course, the governance targets, which without them we will lose even more terrain. Okay. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that, Anselmo. But I can talk more about what consequence that should have for member states and for civil society, but we can leave that for later.
Anselmo, yes, very busy with SDG16 thematic review being hosted tomorrow. But yeah, the question about how do we engage with HLPF and global level? I just wanted to just say everything that we've talked about with SDG16 plus. That is one of the reasons that we use this term SDG16 plus, is that we feel that it is linked with all other SDGs and it underpins the entire 2030 agenda. So when it comes to engaging at the global level or looking at response and recovery and building resilience from the COVID-19 pandemic, I think it's really important for us to not just focus on those SDG 16 targets, but on how SDG 16 or seeing all of this through an SDG 16 plus lens is what we always say. So how is SDG 16 plus linked with gender equality or inequalities? I mean, I think there's a lot that we can explore here. So for example, you mentioned, Anselmo, SDG 16 will not be reviewed at the HLPF for the foreseeable future. We're not sure when it will be reviewed next, but I do think that there's an opportunity for us to say, we can still bring SDG 16 plus elements into the thematic review of other SDGs because of that SDG 16 plus link. And just one thing I wanted to mention as well, in engaging in the HLPF and the global level, is that we help to co-facilitate a process around what we call the Rome Civil Society Declaration on SDG 16 plus. We mobilized around this original Rome Declaration in 2019 when SDG 16 was under review last time. Right now it has over 170 endorsements from civil society organizations all around the world. Really includes a comprehensive call to action for governments to say, look, we were off track in 2019 for SDG 16 implementation. Now, 2 years later, we're even in a worse situation because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Where are the issue areas that we really need to amplify our efforts on? And here are some things that we need you as governments to do. So it's a really comprehensive call to action. I'll include the link in the chat box here, but for colleagues that want to endorse that declaration and engage around that going forward, that's also another opportunity for our advocacy around this year's HLPF and onwards. But I'll stop there. There's a lot more obviously that we can do, but yeah, happy to answer any questions as well.
Okay, John, I have a quick question. As we know, the Nepal is a country that produces SDG 16 plus report, both government and civil society. Is there any countries, do you know any other countries, SDG 16 plus report, in addition to, SDG general report? Because I believe that there can be also effective engagement strategy in the future, So regardless of priority issue this year and next year, and then we can continue to produce SDG 6 plus report as a part of SDG 4 report.
Yeah, thanks, Anselmo. Just very briefly on that. For the SDG 16 plus toolkit, one of the things that we want to do with that is to help collect spotlight reports to showcase on that platform. So for colleagues that have produced SDG 16 plus spotlight reports, you can share that and we can feature it on that website, on that web platform. In terms of this year, the only specific SDG 16 plus spotlight report that I know of is from colleagues in Mexico. I'm happy to share that after this as well, but that's the only one that I'm aware of that's SDG 16 plus specific at the moment. But again, happy to collect all these reports through the toolkit website.
Okay, so as you know, ADA playing the key role, bringing 10 the national report SDG 16 plus this year. So we hope to see more in other continents so that we can have a really global impact. Okay, let's move to the next one. Diadra, would you like to say now?
Yeah, for the opportunity to come in. Maybe I'll just outline some of the key advocacy messages that Forus has developed on this whole area of SDG 16 plus. I mean, the first thing, and it's been mentioned already, is that we've called for SDG 16 to be annually reviewed by the UN High-Level Political Forum. We believe this would make sure that regular political attention would be given to issues like transparency, accountability, civic participation, and good governance. So we haven't succeeded in the current HLPF review process, but we believe civil society globally needs to keep pushing very strongly for that, because there will be another review in a couple of years' time, and we think that this annual review of SDG 16 plus is critical. We also believe that SDG 17, which, as we said, has a very close connection with SDG 16, should be fully operationalized, and we believe that systematic support should be provided by the international community towards developing effective multi-stakeholder partnerships linked to SDG 16 plus. We also believe that the international community should develop a wider range of civic space indicators linked to SDG 16, and that would mean process and structural indicators, as well as the outcome indicators that are currently in place. And we also have called for the use of citizen-led data to be further developed and recognized by governments, because we believe that some of this citizen-led data, particularly around service usage, where citizens are consumers of services and have first-hand experience of the impact or otherwise of services on their daily lives. So we would really strongly call for this. And the very last call we would make, and this is a big one, but it's one we have spent the last few years advocating around, and that is that the international community should launch a global initiative to support and invest in civil society internationally, with a particular focus on civic space. And we have developed our own global initiative, as you know, within Forus, and we'd be happy to share that with anybody who's interested. So thanks, Anselmo.
Okay.
Back to you.
Thank you very much for your intervention and also leadership role. Hope you can continue. So let's go to the OHCHR. As a UN Human Rights Agency, how do you see your engagement at the HLPF to mainstream the SDG 16 together with the civil society? Catherine, you have 1 or 2 minutes, please.
Good question. And as I mentioned, the High Commissioner spoke yesterday at the high-level political forum, emphasizing the core role of SDG 16 as an enabler and accelerator of the whole framework. So starting from there, some of the key messages, and Deirdre and John have also touched upon these, but the importance of maximizing the complementarity and the use of human rights mechanisms alongside the VNR accountability is extremely important for us, and something that continues every year, whether or not SDG 16 gets reviewed yearly or annually. And we also emphasize the right to participation. This is a central right that forms part of SDG 16 and permeates along the whole framework. If we have greater ownership of the 2030 agenda at all levels of society, then we strengthen the pathways for collaboration. And CSOs really provide a very, very important role in reporting and monitoring SDG 16, and the gaps that we're seeing in SDG 16 for data and measurement of indicators and targets is really importantly filled by by CSOs, by civil society, and their ability to be on the ground with people at all levels, and to see what the reality is of especially those who are marginalized in development. So, the idea of evidence-based approach and systemic root cause analysis of the injustice, social injustice, is very, very important in the SDGs, and SDG 16 provides the institutions to be able to give that data a chance to be visible and to be taken into account in the SDGs. So without that disaggregated data, without civil society providing the ground level understanding of the reality, the idea of equality is really abstract and we won't be able to fulfill that without this evidence-based approach. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. These days, when it comes to human, we have a UPR, Universal Periodic Review, and then we have a VNR and SDG. I see the website, the UN website about UPR. There is a data to show, the linkage between the UPR recommendation and SDG goals, which is very, very helpful to have a more integrated approach, So I hope you can continue. And also we have a human rights indicator by OHCHR. So I think there has been a lot of initiative, to integrate both human rights and SDG. But question is how to translate that all at the national level on the ground, I think civil society should play more proactive role, to mainstream human rights at the national level through SDG16+. Now, Arvind, from governance point of UNDP, how to engage with the HLPF and beyond? Your website, please.
I mean, so UNDP doesn't necessarily engage directly with the VNR process, but I think what we can do to respond to your question, how can we ensure that there's more focus on these issues? And well, 2 points from me on that. I mean, first, and this ties quite closely into what Catherine just said. It's important that we actually prove the linkages between the SDG 16 targets and the rest of the Agenda 2030 agenda. And I think that's absolutely possible. In fact, we just are in the finishing phases of a research project that we're doing with the German Development Agency, the German Development, institution, who are where we are looking at how can you actually substantialize a link between SDG 16 and the other key SDGs. And we can, in fact, show an actual connection. So I think, many of us may have this instinctual understanding that this connection is there. I think what at least we can do from our side is to prove it through empirical evidence that there is a connection between the SDG 16 targets and the other SDGs. So that's the first point. The second point is on data again, because I think we can do more there. In fact, we're working with Catherine's employer as well, the United Nations Office for the Commissioner on Human Rights and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, on UNODC, to develop an SDG survey that has the intention of improving the way, both methodology and quality of data that member states are able to record on SDG 16. But of course, yes, civil society may play an important role in ensuring that these gaps are filled, information gaps are filled. But from our side, I think that's at least from UNDP, also Governance Center. These are the two main avenues through which we can impact on the way that the international community deals with SDG 16 follow-up.
Okay, so thank you very much I hope you can continue to produce. I always enjoy reading your material, produced by Oslo Governance Center. And I hope you can continue. So I think that can be very useful for CSO engagement to improve, the quality of our engagement with more data, Okay, unfortunately, we have to move to the next panel 2. So we have to close the panel 1. I believe we will have the summary recording later on. So I want to thank all the 4 panelists who share your excellent perspective and insight, which is very important for CSO engagement. Okay, let's give a big hands to all the 4 panelists from all over the world. Okay, thank you. And have a good day. And then let's move to the next panel 2. Okay, Josna, over to you.
Thank you very much, Josna. I have found the first session very interesting with a global perspective, re-emphasizing the various themes. I think, as usual, Ansammo has a way of moderating the session and drawing the themes, as well as I thought Nepal made a very interesting presentation, including a very strong national support and implementation with constitutional provisions for SDG 16+. So I think we are then moving very much from global perspective now to a regional and national perspective. And I think I'll invite Josna, who has played a key role today, to give, I think it's your regional study on what were the major trends and recommendations, and you have 6 minutes. I think everyone has kept the time well, so we don't need any bell ringer or anything. So I'll over to you, Josna, for the regional overview perspective.
I promise this is the last time I'm speaking, and then Janison is taking over. Thank you so much again. So in ADA, we came up, we have been working on SDG 16 plus with our member and our partner and our global partner, basically Forus and TAP network. And we have come up with various SDG 16 studies in the past. We released our first study in 2019, and then last year 2020, and this year again in 2021 we released our study on SDG 16 plus. But this year it was based on 13 country case study, and we released during the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development that happened in March 2021. So the study entitled Monitoring and Review of SDG 16 plus at national and regional level. The study basically looked at the trends of various aspects of SDG 16 plus from the civil society perspective, and so we tried to look at and the study was based on various country case study. As said, the countries who participated in this study were Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, Malaysia, Cambodia, Japan, Taiwan, Kazakhstan, and Vietnam. So basically we tried to have countries from Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, and Central Asia, and then we tried it. The study also analyzed the national and the regional trends, and some of the trends that came during this study was how SDG 16 plus is an agent of protecting fundamental rights, and the issue of shrinking civic space has also come up. And apart from this, there are issues like freedom from fear, freedom of opinion, assembly and peaceful protest, living in just inclusive society. The study also talks about the cyber and digital security. Also, since it's a SDG 16 plus, it talked about the right to education and the illicit financial flow, equal participation, and we have come up with various the very interesting civil society data, and how the civil society have been trying to put up the data. The study also looks at both qualitative and quantitative data analysis, and over the 5 years how SDGs has fared, especially in the light of COVID pandemic, and how the COVID pandemic has also impacted the SDG 16 plus implementation in various countries. The issue of corruption has also come up in various, especially in the South and Southeast Asia, a lot. The issues related to challenges in education system, how various schools have been closed, and how they're facing various challenges, and talks about global citizenship education as well. So there are various, it's a very interesting study, and the link is already there, is given by Deirdre. So I would just like to give some of those, the recommendation that came up at the regional and the national level, and some of the, recommendations were from the civil society, basically, that talks about the regional, especially talks about the regional forum on SDG 16 that needs to be created for more collaborative actions to influence the government towards peaceful, inclusive, and just societies. It also talks about the multi-stakeholder engagement process that needs to be initiated under the umbrella of the United Nations for regional peace, trade, and development. There was a recommendation for CSOs in Asia, which can build solidarity through various multi-stakeholder dialogues, and international monitoring to exchange good practices and effective responses to COVID-19 by using international frameworks such as the VNR and UPR or human rights treaties. It is crucial to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. There is a case of having not an integrated follow-up system for the SDGs at the national level that we have seen, and a weak multi-stakeholder engagement mechanism for inclusive and integrated societies. And in some countries, we saw that the SDGs was one of those national strategies for promoting export-oriented economic growth in science and technology field, ignoring human rights. So amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, exploitation of freedom of expression, hence anonymous defamation is at the stake due to the absence of technology ethics. Facilitate a regional multi-stakeholder platform, that also came up, as one of those recommendations. There were also a lot of innovative solutions that was given by the study. For example, support network exchange of knowledge and ideas, and develop learning and sharing platform, support for innovative solutions to the obstacle to meet the SDGs and realizing leave no one behind. Leave no one behind, regional and global cooperation needed for safe migration. The principle of leave no one behind should also involve youth and various marginalized group. Then also expand and institutionalize space for CSOs and people under vulnerable situation, ensure equal access to education for all. The role of regional institutions, which has the great advantage of understanding the national situation better. So hence there should be a plausible responsibility of the regional organizations to conduct the guidelines on sustainable development goal, especially on SDG 16 plus, associated with the human right based approach and low leave no one behind principle for specific region. For instance, the indicator 5.3.2 among SDG 16 plus, ensuring civic space, capacity building. We have heard a lot also from Deirdre that one of those challenges and one of the key recommendations that there is a need to strengthen the capacities of not only civil society but also the government and the business stakeholder to get a better notion of SDG 16 plus, and encourage and support the national and local civil leaders. So these are some of those recommendations and that came up from this study, and I would encourage all of you to read this to read this report, and please feel free to give more recommendation how we can strengthen the regional institution, how can we have more multi-stakeholder participation. Although we have seen in our Asia Pacific region, we have a very, very strong institution through APRGM, and we also engage with UNDP and UNSCAP a lot, but then there is a gap we see at the national level. Also we see at the global level. So how to interlink the national, regional, and the global institution. So thank you so much, Janison, for giving me that.
Thank you. Because time is ticking. Time is ticking, and the 9 o'clock session would start, but we said we'll take up to 9:30. Thank you very much for that overview. And many of us have been part of the other discussions in the SDG Plus study and focus. We have actually a number of people, five speakers at this session. I'm told that a number would speak from a national perspective, like Korea, Japan, Malaysia. Earlier we had Nepal. But I was told that Ms. Priya Sood would, from UNDP, the coordinator for Global Alliance for Reporting Progress on Peace, Peaceful, Just, and Inclusive Society, is more giving a regional perspective. Am I right, Priya? So I mentioned to Honorable Member of Parliament, Maria, that I would ask you to give another regional 3 minutes only, and then we'll go to country-specific areas, regional and country, national. Over to you, Priya.
Thank you to the ADA and to the government of Nepal and all the partners on this call. I'm here, as Dennison said, to speak on behalf of the Global Alliance for Reporting Progress on Peaceful, Just, and Inclusive Society. So we're a coordinating platform of member states, private sector, UN agencies, and civil society trying to accelerate reporting on SDG 16 plus. My remarks will be brief because I feel like the trends that we're seeing globally, we're very much seeing in Asia as well. Data is a fundamental challenge to SDG 16 plus, collection of data, creation of data, and data disaggregation. Things are improving. More and more countries are trying to work on a data disaggregation, specifically with youth and women. But each of the countries that submitted VNRs in 2020, and this is globally, I'm talking, although they reported on at least one SDG 16 indicator, all listed that the biggest challenge for SDG 16 is the data, creating it and collecting it. Related to that, as I mentioned, was the data disaggregation and the element of inclusiveness. We all end our speeches and our statements with ensuring that no one is left behind. It's a very much a normative framework. How do we realize the practicality of that question of leaving no one behind? And one of the ways to do this is through quality data. And what I mean, how I define quality data is in terms of bringing in the official and unofficial sources. And I personally don't like that wording because unofficial makes it sound like it's not meaningful, but the unofficial data is actually complementary, very much complementary to what the government is trying to do. So really with this question of bringing in civil society actors, many organizations on this call, bringing them together with member states inviting in a non-confrontational way, in a complementary way, seeing it as a complement, not a critique all the time, but really using the capacity, using the community-based organizations that are doing super interesting and meaningful work in local governorates and provinces that sometimes the state cannot reach. That data is super useful, super meaningful, and would help the government, as we all know, in helping to articulate this goal and advance it. We've heard great things from Nepal, and I agree, through their voluntary national review, they had a wide consultation process. I can also say that we've run several webinars since January with my colleague, John Romano, the TAP Network, a civil society organization on mainstreaming SDG 16 in VNRs. And there's a resource that we launched earlier this year, which I'll post in the chat soon. But really, we heard quite a bit from Indonesia this year because they are working on a voluntary national review. And they also fully acknowledge that the data disaggregation and the data question is one of the biggest challenges. And not only that they tried, and they did, through a COVID-19 year, consult with over 100 CSOs virtually and physically. So the other challenge right now, especially in this pandemic situation, is how to reach those that are most vulnerable, how to engage them in the discussion, how to engage them in the decision-making processes. The virtual option does, on one hand, open up that sphere. They're able to consult virtually and through online surveys and so on and so forth. However, it's been mentioned earlier, the question of digital divide in data collection is also super challenging. There's two, we're launching today an update of our report in 2019, and it's an epilogue. It's short and sweet, but it really looks at several case studies of countries from all over the world and what they've done this year in particular to help report on SDG 16 through VNRs. There's two case studies that I'll quickly say right now. One is Iraq, that used some innovative survey technologies and techniques to reach women and girls in 5 new governorates in Iraq to collect data on 16, sorry, targets are escaping me, on 16.1 and 16.2. The second one is Finnish. In 2020, they consulted for each SDG, not only for SDG 16, but for each SDG 16, they had 2 tracks, government track, civil society track, and they chose, specific civil society experts on specific SDG topics to report back. So they had 2, and this was carried out by 57 CSO organizations. So there's some innovations going on that we really need to take a look at and learn from. And my final point is, and I can come back to it in another question if there's time, is the question of spotlight reports. John raised this again as well. It's a super valuable process. I encourage civil society organizations to see if it's possible to do them in their respective countries. Not necessarily just on SDG 16, but that leave no one behind participation inclusiveness lens to SDG 16 is derived from those CSOs. Thank you. I will leave it there.
Thank you. It's a tough role to keep to 3 minutes. I know in Geneva when I went for the human rights meeting, they switch off the mic, but I don't think Ada and this event is. But Priya, excellent points on data disaggregation, and the themes that you have highlighted are major challenges. And I think in the years to come, capacity building would be key. Can I invite the Honorable Member of Parliament from Malaysia, who is also the Deputy Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia on SDGs, who has also been an activist on many of these areas to share. You got 3 minutes. I'm not sure how you're going to do it in 3 minutes, but over to you, Maria Chin Abdullah.
I don't know whether it's good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all the attendees here, the panelists. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I will try within the 3 minutes. Basically, I feel that the present pandemic has certainly jeopardized the health and the lives of millions of people. And it has actually tested the nation's resilience and also the governance that we have actually been building, and put extreme pressure, particularly on the vulnerable groups, and in the process of it, excluded them, which actually sets us back, not just in terms of the health aspect, but also in terms of human rights and governance. And these are the current challenges that have highlighted that we still need the interdependencies as nation, and to really press for a strong solidarity. However, in my mind, when we talk about peace, justice, and strong institutions, they will sound like a broken record if we do not take stock of the weaknesses and the inequalities that existed globally and has even deepened further during this pandemic. I feel that the COVID-19 pandemic has indeed perpetuated existing inequalities, and that those who are at risk the highest are the people in vulnerable and marginalized situations. And particularly in Malaysia, we have those who have been classified as in the middle income. They are now falling down to the lower income, B40, that's what we call them, to the poverty line. And that actually also resulted in the poor families falling even far deeper into poverty. To be honest, the last 3 days, I have been flat out just distributing food baskets, and to very genuine cases where they have lost their jobs or they have not received their salaries for very, very long time. So there are a few areas that I feel perhaps we need to really look at, if we are very serious about building peace and justice, yeah, and stronger institutions. I feel that, you know, in order to do that, we cannot achieve it without the full participation of the people. And I believe one of the speakers has mentioned, yeah, people's participation is ultimate, yeah, that binds what we want in stronger institutions. And in order for us to actually do it, I just want to share in the all-party parliamentary group Malaysia on SDG, we have tried to implement that, yeah, where we took on a bottoms-up approach, and we tested this approach, and in most cases it has been rather successful, and in a sense that members of parliament cross parties, yeah, embark on their own solution projects at their own constituencies, and they tried, and there were attempts made, yeah, to actually include grassroots, marginalized groups, discriminated groups, to be part and parcel of the discussion. So they are not just talking about the problem, but they have become part of building the solution for the community. And that is very interesting and very heartwarming to see the results of people participation happening in very small cluster, yes, but it is something, it is a model that I believe many ministries can begin to look into. So then we won't be saying that, you know, bottoms-up approach is just something that we talk about but can't be implemented. We have actually implemented that. And the other thing that is very important is that that participation has to be people-led. It cannot be just inked into policies, but must be implemented right down to the ground level, so that we can empower the people and also empower the structures if we are talking about bringing about peace and justice. And the other thing that we have actually tried out in the APPGM is this interagency dialogues. In my constituency, I tried that. First was to actually have a cultural mapping together with the residents in various low-cost flats to come up with priority areas, and then engage with agencies, yeah, government, corporates, and civil society, various stakeholders that have a say in that in that area, and it was interesting to see that, you know, not only the people were talking about their problems, but the agencies themselves were also talking about their problems, and together finding some form of solutions.
Thank you, YB. Sorry.
You mean my 3 minutes is up?
You have gone beyond 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay, I will make the last sentence. I
Sorry
think
about that.
Yes, okay. Okay. The intention really, what I want to say is that, you know, it's important for us to have a people-led participation, as well as bringing in stakeholders so that they can actually connect. And that is important. The other last part that I feel I need to make is really that the women have to be included into that participation. Most of the time they are not, and that's why they it actually causes 50% of the problem, because you have not included the right people into that discussion. So therefore, if you are talking about really dealing with structural inequalities, then we have to include everyone, because we are actually moving towards a more inclusive leadership grounded on strong political consistencies, and that's famous saying, yeah, leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, YB. 3 minutes actually goes very fast, but thank you for highlighting that, because SDG 16.7 ensure responsive, inclusive, participatory, representative decision-making at all levels is a key theme. Earlier from Priya, we got data and data disaggregation, participation for peace and justice. I'm happy to welcome Gerald Joseph from the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia and independent national human rights institutions in compliance with the Paris principles is one of the mechanisms highlighted in the indicators. Welcome, Gerard, and over to you. You got 3 minutes. See how you manage that. Thank you.
Thank you to Ada and the government of Nepal and all the colorful logos for co-organizing this. The establishment of independent oversight bodies like the Human Rights Commission must exist. And the standard setting, as Denison mentioned, is in compliance with the Paris principles. So I'll give you an example. I'm from the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, but in Southeast Asia, there are 5 more countries. We have 11 countries in Southeast Asia. There are 5 more countries without human rights institution: Singapore, Laos, Brunei, Cambodia, Vietnam. It's never too late. I think it's part of the work is to get political buy-in to establish institutions like the Human Rights Commission. Just to note that Sweden just voted in their new Human Rights Commission a month ago. And if you have an independent commission, it must comply with an international standard. It's not an inborn, homeborn type of commission. Then it's just for show. So the defense of us having A status is very important. Sadly, Malaysia was on the right track in the previous government about 1.5 years ago to set up many other independent institutions, mainly the National Harmony Commission to fight racism, the Ombudsman Office for Civil Service, the Independent Police Commission oversight body, making the Anti-Corruption Commission more independent. And all this is in line with the indicator 16.6 on effective institution. Without this, it's difficult. And I think creating such institutions are important. The other point I want to move on from this is that data monitoring is important, but without a right to information framework, I think we would be just hoping and guessing and begging. And that cannot be how data is managed. Data belongs to all, not just policy makers. And that's why fighting archaic laws like the Official Secrets Act in Malaysia must go and replace with Freedom of Information Act. I think very little work is done on policy reframing and legal reframing in countries. The fourth point is the adequate funding for both human rights commissions and CSO must be made available, because they keep using the word CSOs, institutions are partners to governments, but yet without money, how are they going to exist? And this, I think, is mainly for the CSOs who struggle to be an effective body. And the final part is don't attack your partners. And governments keep attacking human rights defenders, and that's a no-no. And I think SDG partners must start calling out governments to stop criticizing the very partners they aim to work with. In Malaysia, the last week, we had a few NGOs being hauled up by the police. Corruption is another serious matter, and no matter what you do, it comes in all forms. And it also comes in race by utilizing race, religion, and racism as another factor that actually can be brought in to stop SDG realization. So leaving no one behind means everyone is on an inclusive framework. But if national policies discriminate and break people, then not only Malaysians suffer, but foreigners, migrant workers, refugees, and asylum seekers. So I think the framework, the words we have are correct, but there's lack of pushing and calling out governments at the political level to answer to development goals. Development goals is not just merely making sure they have enough to survive, but they may have the dignity to demand rights as a human being in the country. Thank you, Denison.
Thank you very much for the theme of strengthening human rights as well as anti-corruption, but linking it to right to information and the human rights defenders as a key component of SDG 16 in the development process. So Malaysia has had challenges as well as, I think, in the identification of challenges, some of you covered the second question as well in terms of recommendations and strengthening. We can come back to that to pick it up. Can I invite Mr. Ho Yu-chi, who is the Senior Advocacy Officer from the Japan NGO Center for International Cooperation. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see you there. Mr. Hoy.
Thank you, Denison. Hi, my name is Aoi Horiuchi. I'm a Senior Advocacy Officer of the Japan NGO Center for International Cooperation. I'm going to speak about the civil society law about accelerating the SDG monitoring and implementation actions using SDG16 plus based on the context of Japan. So I will show three key laws by civil societies on implementations and accelerating SDG16 plus. First, defend and expand civic space with key stakeholders. And second is provide additional information data on monitoring. And third is mobilize people who seek justice and accountability. The first one, defend and expand civic space with key stakeholders. Japanese civil society has formed Japan Interaction Network for Civic Space, which is called NANCIS, back in 2019. And we've been working to avoid negative impacts on NGO from restrictive laws, building a partnership with lawyers groups, providing consultation with domestic NGOs, and doing research and advocating for achieving SDG16 plus. So here's a list of recent statements by this network. We mainly focus on domestic and international issues such as Hong Kong national security law or human rights in Myanmar, but also domestic issues such as regulation on the land of on the use of land infrastructures, which is vital to national security, which actually in Japan has passed in May. And we also made a joint civil society statement for the 7th periodic review of Japan at the UN Human Rights Commission session last year. The second role is providing additional information data on monitoring. Japan Civil Society Network on SDGs will publish a spotlight report on SDGs in line with Japan's second VNR this year, with analysis and recommendations for all 17 goals. And those spotlight reports include key recommendations on SDG16, such as publishing all global indicators data, or monitoring the progress of a national action plan on global partnership for violence against children. And this one includes people with disabilities in setting up alternative indicators, especially on target 6.7. And also set up clear indicators for access to information. And the last one, establish a national human rights institution in Japan, which doesn't exist at this moment. So the last role by civil society is that mobilizing people who seek justice and accountability. Actually, in May, the government of Japan was trying to pass a law, to amend a law on the immigrant law, but huge protests by the people and the parliamentary members resulted in the abolishment of that law. And Civil Society Network, which is called Solidarity Network with Migrants Japan, SMJ, has published a statement that this is a consensus of civil society. And the abolition of the bill was the result of protests of every citizen with a decent sense of human rights, which actually led to target 10.3 and 10.7, 10.C, which is about safe migration. So here's key 3 roles by civil societies on accelerating and implementation of SDG16 plus in the context of Japanese society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the example of the Japanese NGOs in ensuring the civic space is maintained through advocacy, through people mobilization, and that is something we can definitely discuss in terms of strategies in the context where that space, there is the shrinking space. Let's move on from Japan to Korea. Ms. Hanyu Lee, from who is Manager of Policy Education Center, Korean NGO Council for Overseas Development Cooperation. Ms. Lee, over to you.
My name is Hanyu Lee. I'm working at KCOC Policy Center, and we are the Korea Civil Society platform, but we are just the umbrella organization of Korea Civil Society for Overseas Development Cooperation, not just the local NGO platform. So I would like to talk about the challenges and role of civil society from that point of view.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so at the first, I think the civil society is the partner of international development cooperation project who are the most closely related to the field. So civil society above anyone else should consider the needs and situation of vulnerable groups first in all their activities. And also when promoting projects, we should take human rights based, oh no, it's the last slide, I'm sorry. Okay. So when we promote the project, we should take a human rights based approach and gender sensitivity in order to ensure that vulnerable groups are not left behind. Every slide has some information below, but I have no time to explain it, so just to look at this. And second, I want to talk about the advocacy and monitoring. Civil society monitors other partners, including government, business sectors, and civil society itself. If they comply with, we should check if they comply with the relevant international conventions or norms, and we also check if they uphold accountabilities, especially regarding collapse rule of law, corruption, violation of human rights. Civil society particularly fight against it because these are core values of liberal democracy, and also civil society try to create enabling environment to participate in the policy-making process and actively participate in it. So they contribute the realization of ideal democracy. The last part is our raising awareness and participation. I think the implementation of SDG16 plus depends on the level of political will and civic consciousness. So I think the implementation of SDG16, the strong political will and the mature citizenship could be the catalyst for accelerating of implementation of SDG16 plus, so that we as civil society group should promote people's awareness and understanding of global citizenship. Especially the outbreak of corona pandemic is amplifying global issues such as hate, discriminations, and racism. So the kind of global issues undermine establishment of peaceful, just, and inclusive society. So I believe that a powerful solution to this is global citizenship education, emphasizing solidarity and inclusion. So civil society has a strong responsibility to the importance of civic education, I guess. So far, I will finish my presentation and thank you for listening. I will hand over it to Denison.
I think from the presentations, if we look at the challenges and then we are looking at recommendations of what needs to be done to accelerate SDG 16, we got already a number of points like data collection, disaggregated, people's participation and accountability, strengthening human rights institutions, anti-corruption institutions, right to information, human rights defenders, ensuring civil space, advocacy, mobilizing, citizens' education, monitoring role. A number of points that were raised by the panel already. The question given is 3 key recommendations. It's going to be very long, but only in a sentence or 2, if each person could say what, in your view, should be a recommendation for SDG plus action, for the acceleration in your own country or in the region. Priya, can I start with you? Just 1 point and then, yeah.
I would say right now to this group, particularly the opportunity to create spotlight reports and to encourage the government to include them in their formal VNRs, voluntary national reviews, and that they also participate in the HLPF Civil Society as part of the delegation. And I just posted a paper that we did with the DAG Hammer Scout Foundation, and they're all laid out there very clearly. It's a short paper, 5 recommendations, really key to spotlight reporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Spotlight report. YB Maria.
I just want to emphasize the human rights situation has to actually improve, and I'm glad that Gerald actually mentioned it. But the other one is really to see an intersectional response from the government so as to address all the layers of discrimination, because that will actually help us to make the visible the experiences of the discrimination. Otherwise, it will be lost within various areas. And it would be something that the government has to take on if it's really serious about the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. Your
I think the one point is democratizing data and transforming National Data or Statistics Department as a body that serves government, parliament, and independent institutions. So it does not belong to the government of the day. That's the only way we're going to move forward, that data is independent. Number 2 is the accreditation of processes. We have for human rights institutions a Paris principle. Every 5 years we need to be accredited. But what about the Election Commission? What about the Anti-Corruption Commission? What about the police reform? So I think we need standard setting globally for that. And my final point is, I think it's time we need an audit of enabling laws that's going to support the SDG framework and disabling laws that keep us back. I think governments will give reports on the VNR, but we need to catch them at the cracks and prove that without a reform of laws, and I think we need an audit of these laws nationally. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gerard. A much stronger SDG reporting mechanism. I know you have been very active in the UPR process and the kind of spotlight report, or which is a legitimate process of filing it in. Ayoy?
My recommendation would be like building mutual trust between governments and the civil society through various opportunities such as VNR, UPR, and public hearings.
Public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Lee.
According to the evaluation of implementation SDG16 so far, I think the problem is that there are ambiguous indicators of SDG16 and there's no concrete action plans. So I just suggest that we must actively interpret indicators and actively take an action for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to this panel. I'm really sorry that I had to rush some of you. Time is short, but I think it's a very fruitful discussion, looking at Nepal, looking at Korea, looking at Japan, looking at Malaysia, and getting global and regional perspectives. And I think this conversation needs to go on. There's capacity building and solidarity across the countries, plus a firm commitment, especially in the points for regional mechanisms like ASEAN or in Asia Pacific, UN HLPF, to institutionalize some of these standard settings for SDG 16. If not, many countries don't report or say data is the problem and things of that sort.
Thank you very much. It's about time to close this event. Thank Anselmo Denison for moderating this session. Good job. Thank you very much. It's already 9:30. My remarks is going to be very short. And again, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. It's 10:30 already in Tokyo. It's about time to go to bed. But thank you very much, all of you participating in this event, and also thank all organizations for hosting this event very successful, such as National Global Coalition APPGM, National Planning Commission of Nepal, United Nations Residence Coordination Office of Nepal, KCOC, NGO Federation Nepal, Nepal SDG Forum, JANIC, TAP Network, Forus Malaysia, CSO-SDG Alliance. And I think we have very much learned a lot, and we have to continue this conversation. And we will share the outcome and the recommendation of this workshop with all of you. That will be helpful to identify all the underlying issue of SDG+. And finally, I extend my personal thanks to all for your dedication and support for participating in this event. Thank you very much. This is the end of this event. Thank you again.